Greetings, unsettled souls. I finally got it to work. God, Lord, I freaking hate Google. Welcome aboard, friends, to the Correct Views. Wouldn't be using Google if I had enough money to have a real camera. So I guess as I start this show, I'm going to remind all of you that this is listener supported. That means that this show gets better based on the money you give me. I get paid nothing to do this whatsoever. That's why my camera sucks. It shows. You can donate at the Correct Views at hotmail.com if you do so. Every penny that you give towards me through PayPal at the Correct Views at hotmail.com will go to a better show. And that's what I always long to give you here. We've got lots of Fukushima news to get into. I know that this is some of the most important broadcasts that I do. These tend to get watched more than any of the other ones, so I thank you. And I ask you to share my work because I honestly believe it matters, or I would not be doing this, friends. Get this, it's from Forbes. This year, the evacuated residents of Japan's Fukushima prefecture began returning home. And as they resume their lives, the monkeys who have lived there all along have some cautions for them in the form of medical records. The Japanese monkeys show effects associated with radiation exposure, especially youngsters born since March 2011 meltdowns at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. This is according to the wildlife veterinarian who has studied the population since 2008. Now this matters because how many of you remember that I've told all of you, that we were being lied to about what was happening with the monkeys in Fukushima, with the wildlife in general? I had warned you that we were being set up for misery, that this was all going to start coming down towards us, that this was going to start affecting the health of you and I. Well, now they're saying, oh, it wasn't enough radiation. We know that it was more than enough radiation to cause these problems. And now the animals that are most closely related to coming up with the same problems that we predicted would be coming our way. And of course, we're seeing them with the cancer spikes and the heart disease spikes that have already hit the area, but it's nothing compared to what we're going to see. Dr. Shinichi Hayama detailed his findings Saturday in Chicago as part of the University of Chicago's commemoration of the 75th anniversary of the first man-made controlled radiation nuclear reactor, which took place under the university's football stadium in 1942 and birthed the technology of nuclear power and nuclear weapons. In other words, these were the bastards that helped cause the problem to begin with. And let us remember how important it is to keep that in our minds, because these warnings were extant for a very long time, long before they ever went ahead and actually tested these things. They didn't even know if they were going to catch the entire atmosphere on fire and put an end to all life on the globe. And yet they went ahead and did it anyway. And I don't just mean the Americans or the Allies. It's people, bash America. Yeah, America did it, but so did Germany. Ignored the risks, did not care about the health of you and I, and went ahead with the tests. Well, what are we seeing now? They don't care about the health of you and I, and they're opening things up for things like baseball games, which we'll get to in a minute. They should be apologizing for what they've heaped upon the world from the school. Hayama appeared alongside documentary filmmaker Matsunori Awasaka, who was featured in Hayama's work in the series of annual documentaries exploring the impact of fallout from the reactor meltdowns on wildlife. It says that the fallout led the Japanese government to evacuate residents from a highly contaminated area surrounding the plant and extending northeast. Of course, we know the plume has poisoned the Pacific Ocean. We're seeing a die-off, levels that we've never dreamed imagined before. Basically no life to be found. At least that's a bit of an exaggeration, but compared to what we are used to in the Pacific Ocean, we've never seen death like this before. And it's not coming back. That is which is coming back to form. We have to remember that they didn't find one single solitary tuna that you're being fed, that I'm being fed. They haven't found a single one of them which are devoid from Fukushima radiation, and that accumulates in your body, and that doesn't ever go away. And they say it's safe. How do they know how much fish you're eating? For that matter, how do they know how many fish you're around? Some of these fish markets actually counts to pick up on a Geiger counter. If you don't believe me, go and check. Ayala has studied the bodies of the monkeys killed in Fukushima city's effort to control the monkey population and protect agricultural crops. About 20,000 of the animals have been killed. Because he's already been studying the monkeys, he is ideally positioned to notice changes affected by radiation exposure. So he knows what they were like before this. They can't use that lie. I'm not a radiation specialist, Hayama said Saturday in Chicago, but because I've been gathering data since 2008, remember the disaster took place in 11, it seems obvious to me that it is very important research. I've asked radiation specialists to take on this research, but they have never been willing to take on this because they won't have any resources or time to spare because humans are much more important. Now, the problem here is that this is a direct prediction of what we are going to see in us. Monkeys are the closest genetic animal to us, particularly these monkeys and I guess to a lesser extent rhesus monkeys. So this is a study into people. How they could miss this, I don't know. So I had to conclude that there was no choice but for me to take this on, even though I'm not a specialist in radiation, Hayama said again. His remarks translated by the University of Chicago professor Norma Field. If we don't keep records, there will be no evidence of when there's nothing. It'll be like nothing has happened. That's why I'm hoping to continue this research and to create a record. Friends, that record needs to be created, and there's a lot of people that need to pay attention to what this study is proving, because I'm telling you, there's a lot of people here that are going to be sitting beside. Now, just listen to me. Let's forget that you're listening to a show and just listen to me as a person. There's a lot of people hearing this message that are going to be sitting beside someone's deathbed, watching people get cancer treatments, heart treatments, thyroid treatments, and living in absolute terror. And the reason that this is going to happen is because of the immense amount of apathy that has given towards this problem. Not to mention they were warned about it before it ever happened, and that was another bit of apathy that, for whatever reason, was ignored. Well, we know the reason, of course, the bottom line. TEPCO and GE escape a $5 billion Fukushima radiation suit, and this is from Law 360. A California federal judge on Friday dumped a $5 billion lawsuit against TEPCO, which is GE, over their alleged radiation risk to U.S. Navy members responding to the 2011 Fukushima nuclear disaster, saying that her court lacked jurisdiction over sailors' claims. Don't know. This is General Electric being covered up for. First of all, they were warned that this could happen. Second of all, the government on the USS Ronald Reagan sent American soldiers into harm's way to help with that and never told them what they were being exposed to. Then they said that the levels were too small to have harmed them. And now that they're seeing massive problems and health issues, now there's nobody there to help them, just like the 911 responders got treated. More than 150 California-based U.S. Navy first responders claimed that TEPCO knew there were problems at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power station as soon as 5 hours after the March 11th earthquake and tsunami, but they did not warn first responders. Let's save that to read for the Conservative Daily Post. Now, friends, listen. I've had the pleasure of knowing a handful of soldiers. Welcome aboard, many of you tuning in. I've had the pleasure of knowing many armed forces members who would happily take just about any risk you give them in order to help others and to do their job. However, they ask something very small, very, very small. Could you tell us what we're facing so that when these problems arise, we know what caused them? Can you make sure that our health care will be taken care of and that our quality of life will be as good as it can possibly be when we are done giving everything? But no, that couldn't happen, could it? Absolutely not. Instead, we're going to tell them that it's all in their head, like we did the 911 responders. This is an outrage. Friends, this brings us to the dumbee of the day, the stupidest story of the day. Now, before I get into it, I want to remind those of you that may not know this, that the dumbee of the day is but a precursor to the dunce cap of the month. Now, the dunce cap of the month, as you know, will be going off. It always goes off within the first week of the month, but the holidays had viewership down. Everybody knows nobody was going to listen. So I've put all of this off a little bit, and you will be getting to enjoy the dunce cap of the month, most likely within the next couple days. If not, it will be the very first thing I'm going to get to next week. All right, those are You Are an Idiot music, friends. Get this. In the shadow of a disaster, Fukushima responds with play ball. Again, nothing to see here. Just move on. Nothing to see here. Even though radiation is sending cancer risks through the roof in the ways that Dr. Helen Caldicott and Chris Busby and other people have said would be the case, but all the independents talking about it. A sea of brightly colored banners and advertisements decorated the Fukushima train station in November to celebrate the coming road races and Fukushima United, the local football club. There are new professional baseball and basketball franchises in the region, too. They carry inspirational names like Hope and Firebombs, the latter signifying the spirit of a team connecting to the community, says 20-year-old basketball player Watura Agari. Now, the problem is, here's what they're doing. Let's pretend that this brush I have here is deadly. It's absolutely deadly. And these headphones and this phone here, they have no idea. So I go ahead and I tell these things to come on over here by the radiation. It won't hurt you. And then, of course, I destroy both of them with it. However, because they were able to stand close to the brush for a brief moment in time, it appeared that they were not in danger. By having these players play in this area and having fans show up to this area, and by pretending that it's safe, people are going to see attendees and people playing and say, oh, well, look, it's fine. Nothing's happening to them. And when cancer develops 5, 10, 15 years down the road, they'll never think of it being in relation to having played on this team. But that will be exactly what has caused it based on what we know of nuclear science. So it's very hard to feel sorry for them unless they really don't know any better. Then you can feel horrible for them. For an area with a growing interest in sports, the biggest boom came in March when the International Olympic Committee approved Fukushima to host the baseball and softball games during the 2020 Olympics. However, radiation reports there, and all of you need to know this, are not safe. Okay, they are not safe at all. It's being sold to you so that you won't pull your money out of General Electric stocks. You won't quit buying parts from Japan because you're worried about the radiation that is a part of the units that you're putting in your car. They're more worried about the bottom line than admitting what nuclear power and nuclear technology has done to that area. And very few people give a damn. I'm not speaking to you guys tuning in now. You guys are probably hitting share and rooting me on, but you know exactly what I mean. I am pissed. The 2011 Tohoku earthquake and tsunami, of course, devastated the area. It also damaged the Fukushima's name. Tourism declined. You know how they word that? It damaged their name as if it happened for no reason at all. Like if I suddenly I'm in the library here, if I walk out and start knocking over the shelves and they arrest me, I can act like I did it for no reason at all. Fukushima's name has been tarnished for good reason because it is toxic and no one should live there and nobody should eat anything that comes out from it under any circumstances whatsoever. That is what happened, not a mere tarnishing of their name. Tourism should never return there because it will be toxic for all of our life. That is what the half-life of uranium has taught us. Millions of years. The rest of Japan shunned produce and material from Fukushima, as they should have since it was deadly. It said, we are looked at as Chernobyl. You should be looked at as Chernobyl. I'm sorry, I don't have a whole lot of sympathy for these people because there were warnings given to this. There were warnings not to build these power plants there. There were warnings not to put them up there, and they did. They were ignored. And now everybody's saying, well, we should all be moving right back in. We should all be just fine with what is going on. Well, we are not. The time we were fine with it was when you should have been listening to the people like myself and other doctors who are far smarter than me, warning that this was going to happen long before. Now that it has happened, you need to Move out and realize that you have allowed your area to be poisoned. You should not be covering for it while it poisons other people. And the second baseman of the Tampa Bay Rays in '08 in the World Series. He also won 2 World Baseball Classic championships with Japan and played in the Nippon Professional Baseball League for 13. I call myself a missionary, he says. Even though it's a negative way, many people know the name of Fukushima. We have to change it to a positive way. This man should be beaten with the baseball bat that he plays with for saying that. He is now bringing people into harm's way. Then they get in the name of Fukushima. There is no good name to be had on Fukushima because Fukushima is now poisoned, and everyone knows that for good reason. The Japanese government wants to show the fake side of Fukushima, says Hajime Matsusuku, Secretary General of the Citizens Nuclear Information Center in Tokyo. In his office, he showed a copy of the Fukushima Minpo newspaper, which listed radiation levels all over the towns in Fukushima Prefecture, like box scores in the daily sports section. Asby Brown, who works at Safecast, an organization that helps citizens independently measure environmental data like radiation, says Olympic visitors near the stadium for a week would probably not be exposed to higher than normal radiation levels. This is a sin. This is a sin. And if this is not called a sin, if this idiot baseball player isn't called out for what he did and what he's doing now, then we're only going to exasperate the problem and allow Fukushima, which is General Electric, to win. What can we do? Well, we can share this video, for one. We can tell other people exactly what is going on. We can warn people about the tuna not living anywhere on the west coast of the United States. We can warn people to up their vitamin C intake to 3,000 milligrams a day. We can warn people to take bentonite clay, but there's nothing we can do to put this genie back in the bottle. What we can do is refuse to allow the Japanese government or anyone else to lie to us about it. Friends, you're listening to The Correct Views. Thank you for doing so. Now, before you tune out, I see I've got some listeners. Please, I'm begging you, please donate to the show. You can do so at thecorrectviews@hotmail.com through PayPal. I'm never going to get a camera that doesn't suck if you don't, so please do. I'll be dead honest. I'm asking you to help me. Thank you, friends. I'll be back in a couple of days with the Dunce Cap of the Month Awards show. Good night, guys. God bless.